Hi, my name is Chavi, and welcome back to another episode of Making Sense of Macroeconomics with Raghav and Wajeeha. In this episode, we're going to pick up from what we spoke about in the previous one, which is what is the supply creating its own demand? Because in undergrad classes, this is something that we are sort of taught, right? The Say's law, which says that supply creates its own demand. But when you take the example of India, where the governments, both state and at the national level, have rolled out these policies for investors to come in, even foreign investors to come in, put in, factories, we are not seeing the investment demand in the country rise. And why is that happening?
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. The supply creates its own demand is, in fact, it's a myth. That's not the reality we actually live in. Consider some of these examples. Simple example, like go back to the pizza analogy that we picked up in the last episode. The Say's law, which is supply creates its own demand, says that when you make more pizzas, you will find buyers for those pizzas, which is actually not true. It essentially says you produce more, generate more pizzas, and people will buy it. But the pizza maker cannot assume that every pizza that is made will be bought, right? So demand might not match supply in this case. Second example, think of, students, MA economics students here. Student invests in education expecting to find a better job, right? Or later after the education. So they are investing in human capital. But just as producing more pizzas doesn't ensure buyers, acquiring more education does not guarantee an employment, right? It gives you a skill, but that does not guarantee employment. Think of making instant creator of an Instagram post. The content creator cannot know how many likes or engagement that will happen in the post. So in all these examples, demand is not automatically generated by supply. So you can produce, you can study, invest, and post in Instagram, but you cannot assume demand or engagement will automatically follow, right? So in reality, demand can fall short, leading to unsold goods, unemployment, and Insta post not getting engaged, right? Therefore, Say's law breaks down, right? Production does not guarantee, sales.
That makes sense because I put so much effort into my Instagram posts and thinking about all the aesthetics, but that does not really translate into the likes that I would wish for. So why does the Say's law break down then?
Well, the simple reason is that one cannot know the demand for the product or the size of the market, as we talked before, whether it's pizza or skill or Insta posts. You can produce with the hope or expectation that your output will be sold, but there is no guarantee it will be. In simple terms, you can control what you produce, not whether others want it.
Then what determines the demand or the size of the market in the economy?
That's where the study of macroeconomics begins. The revenue for pizza maker, go back to pizza analogy again. The revenue for pizza maker comes from people buying his pizzas, right? Where does the purchasing power to buy those pizzas come from? It comes from people's income, right? And where does their income come from? From their own employment, isn't it? So someone else's spending is our income in the economy. And with that income, we buy pizzas and other goods and services. Therefore, the size of the market is determined by aggregate spending in the economy, which determines both our consumption and savings, right? That makes sense. Now, as you can see, the causation in Say's law is working in reverse direction in real life. It is the spending that creates income, right? Or expenditure that creates savings, not the other way around. Yeah. Does that make clear with the pizza analogy?
Yes, it does. That is a lot more better to understand since it's pizza.
So from this, there are three things that are very clear to me. One is that the pizza owner's profits will depend on the demand for his or her pizzas. Just because the owner is investing 1 crore in the business, that will not automatically imply that he or she will earn profits. Second, what I understood is that it is the expenditure or the investment that the pizza owner undertakes that is creating the income for the workers, and the payment to the grocery store that supplies raw materials in the bank, interest, extra, extra. But the profits are the residual payment that the pizza maker pays himself for all the unpaid work he or she undertook before setting up the business. Therefore, The size of the market is determined by aggregate spending in the economy, not by the supply of goods and services that are produced.
Yeah, that's exactly true. So, in other words, it's demand that creates its own supply, not the supply creating demand story that you studied in undergrad classes. And this is one of the classic results of macroeconomics, demand side macroeconomics. So, if you want to make sense of macroeconomics, you need to think in terms of demand, not just supply. Yeah.
Or pizzas.
On pizza. That's what you want. I think this is a fundamental stumbling block to sometimes. We all habitually start thinking that somehow supply will create its own demand. You produce a movie with 500 crores budget and that's going to have a blockbuster, earn about 10,000 crores. Not true all the time. There are many big budget movies flops, right? Because there's no demand for them. It's not as if so it's demand that creates supply. I hope this causation is clear now in terms of how we think about the real life.
So now that brings me to this important topic in macro that we struggle with in class quite a bit, savings and investment. So Raghav, could you tell us some, stuff about that?
All this talk about pizza has made me very hungry. Let's have some pizza in Darshini Cafe. let's go to pizza. But that's a very important question that we need to pick up. It's one of the fundamental issues in macroeconomics between savings and investment. That we'll pick it up in the next episode. So today it's pizza time right now. Let's go. Thank you, Chavi and Wajeeha.
Thank you.
Thanks for the pizza, Raghav.
It's on me.